Hi, Jenna. Jeff Allen here. I just saw your read your post a day or two ago about the romancing someone for learning a language. I thought that was a really good post. I'm not going to go read through it again and say it here, but I read through it and identified with that in different ways, and I'm going to kind of walk through and explain it. And thanks for sharing your experience with that because it helps to see the perspective there, and I'll give my perspective of having gone through this, not going through the same thing, but in actually a reverse situation over the past 35 years. So I took languages in junior high school and in high school mainly, and I went on to do one of my bachelor's degrees was in French, other was in text analysis, and I went on to do linguistics. So I'm a phonetician, and I do work in syntax and semantics, and sociolinguistics and that kind of stuff. But I'm a phonetician mainly, phonologist, and did that for I went up to do my grad studies for masters, and I taught languages too. I taught for mainly executives and stuff. I did some university teaching for a number of years, but then I finally went into teaching in businesses, right? So teaching, going and working and teaching with professionals, managers, directors, and stuff. Did that for a number of years before I came into the software industry. So I was a language person in that way, but a linguist too. A linguist in the sense of theoretical linguistics, right? Applying that to a language and doing that. And that came into play I'll talk here in a couple of minutes, but I want to give that background a little bit too, because that help. I love learning languages, right? So new ones, hard ones, right? So that are phonetically difficult. So after all those degrees and stuff and working and teaching, I got married to a French lady because I came to France in 1989, and but I already spoke French pretty much fluently, and I had a degree and came here to do my master's work. And I got married to a French girl, and we moved to the United States within a few months. It was already planned for me to go do another doctoral degree in career linguistics at Indiana University and all that. And she didn't speak English very well. I mean, we always spoke in French. She really didn't have a level of English that was up to par to anything. I didn't care because I came here to be integrated and assimilated in French culture. So we spent 4 years in the States, and she learned English there quite well. And not for me, but I was her walking dictionary, but I didn't teach her the language, right? And she didn't marry me for Englishness. I mean, it was a friendship, right? So that we went to the States, and then we came back, and we spoke in French in the States for the 4 years. So we pretty much spoke French all the time, which kept my level up already, and on a regular daily basis. We'd listen to French radio and stuff and shortwave and all that. And we came back to France in 1999, 1998. And when we had kids a little bit later, we would choose the one parent, one language perspective, And we spoke French at home in France, but each of us spoke to our kids in English or French, one language, one parent, one language. And so that whole experience there it wasn't for, not, I probably married her because I was in France, right? I was already here. It wasn't to learn another language, but it was where I wanted to be, okay? Where I decided to come to, and where it took years to get training to get here where I wanted to be. So it was a different perspective of that. Now I'm going to fast forward here, after 21 years of marriage, and over the past year, and my kids speak to me in French. I speak to them in English, sometimes in French, kind of depends, but they always speak to me back in French. That's since the beginning. I'd never forced them to actually speak to me in English. French is the home, but for me it was English. Where we'd be outside and all that. Now, the past year, I've been dating again after a number of years, and that is a whole nother experience. Living in France with, end of teenage years, beginning 20s years, between 19 and 21, my kids, 22. And I was on a few dating platforms and stuff. And that I found was what was really interesting in the beginning, was that the women that seemed to kind of attract were the ones that were not French, French, long generational French women from French names and stuff. There's a word for that, French, long term kind of. They were tended to be immigrants of first or second generation, I'll say that way. So, and sometimes Spanish and Portuguese, or Spanish, Spanish and Portuguese were the kind of the background ones that tended to kind of at least catch interest. Now there were Romanian and Russian too. And the funniest thing, I don't have a, oh yeah, I do. I'll grab it here. I'll put this in pause for a second. It's back here. I got the piece of paper. I'll show you here. So what I found, I thought about a couple things. Did I want to date someone that would need to be somebody in France, pretty much, but that's kind of sure. But did I want to have an English native speaker? Okay. That want to work that understood my culture. That would help a lot. I found that that's kind of pretty important for both people to understand each other, especially like people like in the language field. You don't even think about it, right? Some people, translators, tend to kind of get together, or tend to be with somebody that's in the country, right? So, but I thought about that, and I did look at dating. And there were a few women that were native speakers, but lived here for 30 years too. But there were a couple of Spanish speakers, and I speak them in Spanish, right? But then there were a few women that, like I said, Romanian, Russian. And what we did is, I said I learned language, and I said, and I just the year before I'd spent a couple weeks in Holland, in the Netherlands, and I decided 1 week I'm going to learn Dutch, and I have a whole playlist on my YouTube channel just how to learn Dutch in 1 week. So had done that the year before, and so two of the ladies I remember specifically, we're having breakfast with the Romanian girl, and and I said, well, I can figure out your language quickly. And she said, no, you can't. And I said, I can. So we were eating breakfast, and within between 30 and 40 minutes, I had completely figured out her whole vowel and consonant system like this, right? You can't see this very well, but I know vowel. You can't see this very well here, but I made a consonant chart and a vowel chart. And then I started marking all the minimal pairs down here, figuring out her language just from sounds, the sound systems of individual sounds and syllables, right? All what they call minimal pairs. You can look it up. And within like 30 minutes, it's just, but you need to learn language like this. I said, no, this is how I learn it, because I work on traditional unwritten languages. You have to do this. We have nothing to writing to base it on, right? It's all international alphabet, right? The IPA. And that whole language, the whole thing I figured out in 34 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. Now, that didn't mean I could speak the language. It just meant I figured out all the sounds that exist in the language and don't exist in the language, right? And I'd done a thing for Dutch the year before, in several days. Then I did the same thing with Russian. Like we had a lunch with a Russian girl, and like 20 minutes, I figured out all the sounds, right? And I found that was interesting. Coming back to your thing about romancing over language, I think that did was, I finally didn't stay on with a few because I found it that I didn't want to learn the language to be able to speak the person, right? That's a difficult thing already. It's always a challenge. It's fun, but when I was married, my wife had said, "We're not going to go to any place that you know the language. So you not become like a linguistic linguistic field work. When you go somewhere you don't know the language, we went to somewhere I couldn't learn it 1 week. Well, I've been able to learn a language within a week to a certain degree, right? So I think what you're saying and the experience I've gone through. And now I'm with somebody that she doesn't speak any other language but French, not even English. I mean, she can understand some things I say, but it's really, she's not used to the accent at all. She's not advanced at all. Her kids don't even speak English. So but I found that what's important is to have all the things that are in common, right? The sense, things that you like, activities you like to do together, right? You just have to have a language in common. You can do it naturally French. But I think that what you're saying is true if you want to you're kind of enticed with the language. You want to do that. You'll want to be with the person, but then the language becomes the factor. And I totally understand that. Not any of my experience didn't follow that because I already knew the languages, or there was a beginning of interest, but the interest is for linguistics and language, and I kept that separate. I spent the time, figuring out the language of the person like in a couple hours, but that's not going to do it for long term. So I agree with you on a lot of those points that it can lead to something where it's not going to go anywhere, and you have to have other points of interest and things that are going to kind of keep you together. So that's my experience on it. Have a good day.